with you and talk about plagiarism and the importance of avoiding it, and then leading into why we bought the software called Authenticate that you guys can use. So you see the definition of plagiarism right in front of you. You probably know this. This is probably your review. But basically, the bottom line is anything that you borrow, any text that you borrow, any images, any language that you borrow from someone else, you have to attribute to them. And it's common respect, but it's also ethical practices when you're writing. So a charge of plagiarism can have serious consequences. If you're a student, you could fail a paper, or you could get kicked out of a university. As a professional researcher, though, you could lose your job over plagiarism. Of course, your article could be rejected or retracted. But most importantly, either as a student or a researcher, you're going to lose credibility with your writing and your professional standing. So you guys can all think of instances probably in the last couple of years that people have been accused of plagiarism, that journalists or TV anchors have falsified reports or maybe not credited the sources they got stuff from. And every time that happens, that person loses quite a bit of credibility to their audience. So that's what you want to avoid. So I wanted to give you an example of a journal's policy on plagiarism. The American Journal of Nursing has a policy, and theirs is when plagiarism is detected either by the peer reviewers or the staff editors before or after acceptance, during editing, or at any time before publication, the American Journal of Nursing staff will alert the author, and then they'll ask the author to rewrite or quote exactly and to cite the original source. So they give the author a chance. If the plagiarism is extensive, the article can be rejected, and the author's employer could be notified of the infraction. If plagiarism is detected after publication, the editors will notify the readers of the infraction. They'll retract the article, which means take it back. And then, of course, they're going to notify the plagiarist's employer again. Okay, so you don't want to get caught plagiarizing. And most often, we know about plagiarism and we avoid it, but occasionally you can accidentally fall into it. So with all of that being said, what is plagiarism? The two little tiny checks on the left side are, pretty widely known. If you buy, if you steal, if you borrow a paper from someone else and call it your own, it's plagiarism. If you hire someone else to write a paper and put your name on it, it's plagiarism. The stuff on the right side might be a little bit newer to you. So the top one, copying a large section of a text without quotation marks or proper citation, that's probably what happens the most, right? We're all really busy writers. While we're writing, we might copy from one source, throw it into our Microsoft Word document, and have the best intentions on putting quotation marks or a source citation next to it, and we might just forget. That happens, but it's still called plagiarism. Using images without documenting the source. If you use an image from the internet, from another researcher, from a journal, maybe even a table, you have to document where you got it from. You have to cite your source. Also, building on someone else's ideas without citing their work. If another researcher comes up with a theory or a discovery and you want to speak more about it, you're welcome to in a paper, but you have to credit the person who originally came up with the idea. Poor documentation of sources is called plagiarism. Every journal is going to give you a preferred standard of citation. JAMA has their own. A lot of publishers say to do with the APA style. So they want you to follow this style. If you don't follow it well, they can call that plagiarism. These last two are interesting. This is self-plagiarism, copying your own previously published work without citation. So say you wrote an article a few years ago and you want to follow up on the information you presented. You have to cite yourself. And I know it sounds weird to cite yourself, but you have to, because not only are you citing yourself in that case, you're citing the journal that published you as well. Okay, so self-plagiarism is kind of a big problem. Also, if you submit an article to one journal and it's published, you can't submit it to another one because it's double dipping. Again, it's plagiarizing. So if you submit it to Nature and then a few years later you want to submit the same article to Science, you can't. You can change it significantly, and cite yourself and redo, probably some research at that point, and then you could submit it, and then it would probably be okay. Okay, so all different types of plagiarism, which probably leads you to the question of when do I cite things? Well, like I said before, you want to cite someone else's ideas or works or words that you have built on. You want to cite whenever you interpret their idea or react to it as well. It could be like reacting positively or negatively. If you've mentioned someone else's work, you have to cite them. Also, if you are making a factual claim, so something that you didn't derive on your own, but something you got from someone else, you need to cite it. The basic rule is, if you have to ask, should I cite this or not, you should cite it. Okay, so it's better to oversight than undercite. There are cases, though, when you don't have to cite. And generally, this is just, you're not going to cite because it's your own words. It's your own experiences, observations, thoughts, your own results that were obtained through your lab work or through your experiments. Okay, so if you made it, you don't have to cite it. If you made a line drawing that you're submitting along with your article, or if you took a photograph or something, you don't have to cite. Again, if you borrowed someone else's, different story. The last bullet on there is common knowledge. You don't have to cite common knowledge. Common knowledge is, it's something that we can all agree on. So often it's dates. Say July 4th is widely accepted as Independence Day in the US. You wouldn't have to cite that. It's a fact. We all know that. The basic rule for common knowledge is if you can find 5 people who give you the same answer, then it's common knowledge. So you may have some examples in your own fields, but it's another tricky one. So again, if you're in doubt of whether something is common knowledge, you can certainly cite it. And I just looked at the chat. Van, you're asking for the phone number to call in. There's not a phone number. You should be able to hear me through Adobe Connect. Although if you can't hear me, that's not helpful. I'm going to type that. Okay, so I'm going to go on and hopefully Van can figure out what's up with the speakers. Okay, so that's what to cite, what not to cite, kind of what is plagiarism. The reason we are talking about this isn't because some big issue happened here at MD Anderson. So there wasn't like a large, plagiarism scandal or anything. But there is rising plagiarism and misconduct in medical research. And you guys can see the paper right in front of you. And I'm going to kind of read you the highlights from that too. So the highlights of this paper, in 2009, there was analysis of the Web of Science database for the Times Higher Education Journal that revealed that the rate of retractions for journals has increased tenfold in the last 20 years. And retractions, of course, are when a journal publishes a paper and then has to take it back for some reason, usually some sort of fraudulent reason or plagiarism. So many of the retractions, many of these increased retractions were due to plagiarism. But retractions really only tell a part of the story because only published posts are retracted. So many more papers that are plagiarized never even get to a published state, which is good. So the journal Cancer Biology and Therapy rejected 221 articles because of plagiarism in 2012 alone. That's a lot in 1 year. So among these articles rejected, 43 of them had more than 40% of the content similar to another paper. Half of those cases were matters of self-plagiarism, and the other half involved more traditional plagiarism. So before, when we were talking about self-plagiarism, you have to cite yourself. So it's something that a lot of people don't realize that they need to do in research. So the journal Cancer Biology and Therapy has a plagiarism checking software, and since they put it into practice, they have not had to retract any articles. Instead, they catch them up front, and then they're able to reject the articles instead. So this plagiarism checking software is what we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. So the medical research community is faced with plagiarism and misconduct issues. So this threatens the integrity of scholarly research and publishing, as well as medical practices. Growing evidence shows that plagiarism in submitted materials hampers the dissemination of legitimate findings, and then ultimately could lead to improper patient treatment. So this is big, right? This could be grant misconduct, it could be fraudulent. So it's something that we certainly all want to avoid. And we can do that with Authenticate. So Authenticate is the tool, the most widely used tool by publishers these days and funding agencies to check for plagiarism before publication of an article. So they check for plagiarism to ensure the originality of the work so that they can catch it up front before they publish an article that's been plagiarized and then have to retract. Not only does that look bad for the author, of course it looks bad for the journal too. So why do you want to use it? The Research Medical Library is licensed to Authenticate for all MD Anderson employees to use to test your manuscripts and your grant applications and your assignments, whatever you'd like to test prior to submitting them to detect any potential problems. So the main benefit of Authenticate for you is that you can ensure that you've sufficiently cited your sources and you're presenting the highest quality of written work when you are submitting an article. So I'm going to tell you about how it works, but your first question is probably, how do I get an account? It's really easy. We have a limited number of users for Authenticate, but we really have plenty for all of you. So Authenticate, all you have to do is email rml-help@mdanderson.org, put your name and your department in your email, and we can turn around an account to you pretty quickly. So once you get an account, I'll talk to you about how to get it started, but I see I have a question. So Patrick, you've asked, how about progress reports? Are you asking, can you submit a progress report to Authenticate to look for plagiarism? Yep, you knew my question. Yeah, you can do that, and I'll talk about the different types of files you can submit. Good. Okay, so this is how you get an account. I'll touch on this again in just a minute. Okay, here's how you start. Once you get your account emailed to you from the library, you want to upload a file. And Authenticate has a really basic dashboard for you to use. This is what it's going to look like. You have a folder called My Documents. You can make additional folders if you want. If you're working on different projects or with different groups or something and you want to make different folders, you can do your own file structure. Basically, you submit a document by clicking the Browse button that you can see where it says Choose File, kind of the same way you're always submitting documents these days. That browse your computer, choose your file, click Upload, and Authenticate begins to work. You have the choice of instead doing just a text upload, or you can just upload, copy paste all your text and upload it to a box too. I like the choose a file method because I like to see my paper the way I wrote it, all formatted, and then I like Authenticate to compare it that way, but it's totally up to you. Okay, so this is how you submit, and then these are the types of files you can submit, and you can see all of them. They're pretty standard. Most Microsoft stuff, some open office stuff, a PDF as well, website text you can submit as well. Okay, so there are some things that you're probably not seeing on there that you wish you could submit. And I guess I should tell you, files can't be larger than 400 pages or 40 megabytes. So 400 pages is huge. That would be like submitting a whole book. You can submit up to 400 pages. If you have more than that, you might want to break it into 2 pieces, and then you can submit 400 and 400 or whatever you want to do. So not more than 400 pages, and I'll tell you, if you submit a really large file or a really long document, it's going to take just a little bit longer for Authenticate to work through it. So when you submit a 2-page document, it might take 2 minutes to get a report back, and it just goes up from there, really. So I've never waited more than 5 or 6 minutes for a report, and I've been using this for just a couple months now. Okay, so there are probably file types, like I was saying, that you wish you could submit. Specifically, I've worked with a couple groups that are making presentations and making posters, and they wanted to make sure that information wasn't plagiarized. Do you guys have any ideas how I could submit a PowerPoint file if Authenticate doesn't want to take it? How could you potentially submit a file type? I see a Wallace typing. Cool, convert it to PDF, exactly. So within PowerPoint or Excel or lots of other programs, you can convert your file to a PDF. Once you do that, You can submit the PDF, and iThenticate will look over it. So specifically with one of the groups that I was working with that wanted to submit a PowerPoint, they wanted to check the notes section of their PowerPoint because they expected to be presenting straight from the notes, and they wanted to make sure that they didn't say anything that wasn't their own words. So we were able to trick PowerPoint into saving the notes pages. You can choose how you want PowerPoint to save or print. So we told it to save the notes pages as a PDF, and then we were able to upload, and it worked for them. Okay, so there are ways to get around these file types. PDF is your solution. Okay, so once you've submitted your file, you probably want to know what kind of resources iThenticate is comparing to. And again, it's in front of your face. 42 million publishers, 93 million content partners, which again kind of look like publishers and databases, and then 52 billion online sources. So that's comparing it to a ton of stuff. Is that everything in the world? No, but it is quite a large comparison. So let's see, in addition to the internet, because iThenticate maintains its own web crawler, I've kind of already said this, 40 million published research articles from 590 or more scientific, technical, and medical publishers. So including databases like PubMed or EBSCO or Gale. In addition to all of this searching, iThenticate is looking through 30 different languages. So it's searching for content matches in 30 different languages as well. So that doesn't mean that it's looking at your paper written in English and comparing it to Chinese papers. It means, it's comparing language to language at that point. Okay, so lots of comparisons. Once it compares, what you get back is called a similarity report. And this is what a similarity report looks like. So how do you see these results? You've submitted your paper on your dashboard. You wait, 5 minutes, and what you'll get is a little percentage match. In this case, it would say like 38%. I'd click on the 38, and I get the similarity report. So this is highlighting text within the paper that you submitted, and it correlates to the original sources on the side. And you can see each one is in a different color, which makes it really easy to look through and find. So the results include a percentage score, and that's that 38% that you're looking at. That's the similarity index, which indicates how much the document matches other sources out there. So iThenticate is not calling you a cheater when it comes up with your match or anything. And it's not telling you that you've plagiarized. But what it is telling you is that 38% of your paper is similar to other papers out there. And you can see that 38% is the addition of all the smaller pieces, like 3%, 3%, 2% there, all add up to 38. All right, so let me show you another view of that. This is a paper that I submitted, and just to kind of explain a little bit more about the highlighted boxes, iThenticate identifies material that matches text from other documents found, in all the sources we just talked about, databases, websites, other partners. So the results include color-coded and number-coded highlighting that correspond to the iThenticate database. So you're encouraged to look carefully at these portions to determine whether other sources have been properly cited. So as a result of that, iThenticate makes it really easy for you to identify and attribute any material that might contain unintentional plagiarism. And the way you do this, you can kind of see my number 1 there. I hover over that pink highlighting, and what happens, an internet site pops up, and it shows exactly the words that are similar. And it also gives me the site that I can click on to go straight to. And then I can either compare my words, or maybe if I forgot to cite that, I can go ahead and insert the citation then. Okay, so I think that's a real benefit. It kind of allows you to catch your mistake before submitting it anywhere. So let me answer this question on the side here. Does iThenticate database include paid full text articles or only abstracts? So it's also full text articles. So in my case here, it's pointing me to a website. If it were from a journal article, it would point me, like number 4 on my matches is actually a journal article. It's going to point me to that article. If I'm here on campus, I probably have access to it. I can click on it, and then get all the citation information I need. Okay, so one drawback of this, I think, and you can see my number 1 has a quotation mark before the beginning of it, and I did properly cite it. So I think this is kind of a drawback because highlighted text can include text that has been properly quoted or cited. So it's not necessarily plagiarized, but it's similar. So you need to verify that the highlighted section has been properly quoted, summarized, or paraphrased. And in some cases, like my number 1, it was done that way already. Okay, so that's kind of frustrating, but I can adjust my settings. So once you get into IThenticate, you can adjust your settings to get more precise results. Maybe I don't want to see things that already have quotation marks around them, so I can exclude quotes. IThenticate is going to match your bibliography. It's going to find the same title and author's names, so you may end up with a percentage match on your bibliography too. So if you'd rather, you could exclude it. So I think excluding those 2 things is kind of a good thing. The other things that you can exclude, I would be a little careful about. Excluding phrases or smaller matches, so just a few words that are similar. You probably want to see those just to make sure that you haven't accidentally plagiarized, that you've certainly cited as much as you should. You could also exclude your abstract or your methods and materials sections. Totally up to you again, but I think I would want to be careful that it wasn't too similar to someone else's. Okay, but those are all settings that you can choose to use or not use. So on this next slide, what I did, the first one is my 19% match, and in that case, I was allowing IThenticate to catch all my quotes and my works cited and all that kind of stuff. So what I did some exclusion, and when I ran it through the second time, once I've excluded my quotes and my bibliography and all the other stuff, I've only got a 2% match, and that's way better. So seeing a 19% match making me think that like 1/5 of my paper was plagiarized is kind of scary. But once you've excluded the things and you end up with only a 2%, then you realize that you're doing pretty good. So you can run your papers as many times as you want. If you run a paper and then want to, add some citations or exclude some things for IThenticate, you could certainly upload it and run it again because it's your account. You can do what you want with it. Okay, so the question we get asked a lot is, what about privacy and IThenticate? So you have an individual login when you have an IThenticate login. So only you can see the papers that you're submitting, and only you can see your similarity report. So only you can see that 19% or 38% or whatever of your paper possibly matches another paper out there. You can choose to share those results if you want, but if you upload your own paper, only you see it. So as each time you log into your